All right. Well, I think we have most everyone joining in. Like I said, I'm Carolyn Keller, founder of Curio 412. We're a consultancy for nonprofits and small businesses, and we help to increase capacity and really work with organizations to strategize around um, to attain their mission. And we have with us today Amanda Becker from Appleseed Events as we take a look at the topic of monetizing your virtual event. So I'm going to let her introduce herself and tell you a little bit more about Appleseed.
Hi, good morning, afternoon. Yeah. My name's Amanda Becker. My company is called Appleseed Events. Last year, I planned about 30 events with my clients, and this year it has been much less than that. So this topic is really exciting and interesting because this is one that a lot of us are facing head on. So I'm excited to talk to you all about these challenges. Appleseed Events plans events. It helps nonprofits, mostly some small businesses, membership organizations, to make profitable events. We say that events are like apple seeds. If you take good care of them, they can grow into something fruitful.
Awesome. Thank you, Amanda. I'm really looking forward to hearing more about what you have to say. As we get started, I want everyone to make use of our chat. Take a look at opening that up, type your name in, type what organization you're from, and if you feel comfortable and would like to network with people, you can feel free to throw in your contact details too, your email address or maybe a phone number if you want to connect with some colleagues here. And that's kind of where we wanted to start, is who's here, because we had such a good response from people who are interested, and this topic is very timely right now. And so we did ask a few questions when you registered just to get a sense of where everyone is. And so the interesting thing that I thought looking through is we asked, how many do you host annually in terms of events? And then how many do you plan to host in the future? And these two topics looked almost identical. So most of you are at that below 15 amount, although some of you do host more than that. And that doesn't seem to have any plan to change in the future, even with everything that's going on. And I think that's a really great thing, because we all need to get engagement. We need to have people involved with our organizations. So as we think about who's here, we can keep that in the back of our mind too. The other thing that we asked was what types of events bring your organization revenue. So we know we have people from small businesses, from nonprofits, social sector, and we wanted to take a look at what those events look like. And by far, many people in this group are missing out on revenue from fundraisers or galas, from educational events, fairs and festivals. So we know there's a lot of different ways that your organizations typically make money that maybe they're missing out on right now. And so we're gonna work through thinking about what maybe those things look like in a virtual setting, or look at diversifying what those revenue options look like, since a virtual gala may not be something that it might be on your horizon for this year, or even looking a little bit further out. So just to get us started, I know you're here to talk about monetizing events, but I also wanted to talk first a little bit about free events. And the purpose of that is because there can be benefits for a free event just depending on the purpose that you have. So if you have a goal to build awareness or engagement, maybe you're trying to make those face-to-face relationships with people who are potential prospects or donors. Going virtual gives a much better opportunity to connect with larger audiences, maybe outside of your regional area. And it also gives you a really great opportunity to collect data. So maybe you want to expand your email listserv. Maybe you want to get contact details for people who are in your area. I'm working with a group now, and we are, it's a membership organization that is by the institution, but individuals within that institution only get logins if they request them. And so right now we're running a virtual event for free, and it's exploding the way in which we're able to collect and expand our email listserv, which then means in the future we have more people who are going to get our information, know about us, know what's going on. So in some ways we're building that potential list for future areas where we might ask for donors or engagement or other opportunities down the line. So making that investment even with a free event. But that being said, I know you all came here to talk about monetizing events. And so I wanted to look at thinking first, in terms of who your target audience is. Your events are going to be geared towards those people who are interested in coming, who want to have that value. So think about what you're trying to do with those events. Are you attracting new audiences, and you might have a different type of approach? Maybe you have people who are VIPs, who are already subscribers or members to your organizations, who regularly come to your events, and you'd like to maybe ask them to come and join in a monetized virtual event. Another option maybe is looking at your donor list more specifically, people that have already given and have the propensity to give again. So those are just different things to think of as you start to engage with thinking about how to monetize your event, is really thinking about what's the motivation, what's the value for those different types of audiences that you're going to end up connecting with. And then I'm going to turn it over to Amanda to talk a little bit more about what your event goals might look like, and talk more on the monetizing side of pricing structures, sponsorships, a lot of the things that I know you've come to learn about more today.
Perfect. Thank you. So one of the things that I tell my clients all the time is that they have to know what their goals are. And this sounds like something that's really obvious. But when you're working on an event, you want to, at the very beginning, try to figure out, what you're trying to accomplish. Because honestly, and I'm an event planner, so it's kind of funny maybe to say this, sometimes an event, number one, isn't the best way to reach that goal. And sometimes it's not the only way to reach that goal. So that's the one reason that you should look at that. But events can be a lot of goals, but don't just say like, oh, well, we're a nonprofit, we're trying to raise money, because I'm sure a lot of you are trying to raise money, whether you're a nonprofit or not, but I think you should have a number to that. So make sure that you're being specific and that you're saying exactly how much you want to raise. And when I say how much you want to raise, I don't mean the total number. And okay, let me rephrase that. I mean the total number after expenses. So it's not really that good if you raise $100,000 and your expenses were, $90,000. You raise $1,000, and that's great, but that's not, in my mind, raising $100,000. So I like to over explain that point, because I think it's super important to have very specific goals in what you're trying to accomplish, because then you need to reframe the rest of your event based on those goals. So those goals can be, reaching new people. It can be raising funds like we talked about. It can be, putting new people on your list. It can be, re-engaging people maybe that have given before. It can be a lot of different things, but I want you to have numbers to those goals because that's very important. So that's number one. That's kind of like the overarching kind of introduction to this topic, because if you're going to monetize your event, great, but how much are you going to raise? I think that that's important. So we're going to get started here, and I'm going to ask you to, I think there's a function on here in the chat. I think you can do it. I want you to send a little wave or raise your hand if you are currently planning a virtual event, or if you're thinking about planning a virtual event. And I know a lot of you have, here it is. I see Emily, there's a few more, there's two. It's giving me little numbers on the bottom. So at least some of you are currently planning a virtual event. I'm sure some of you have already done a virtual event, and that might have been something that you did kind of early on, because that was the only event that you could do. Maybe you pivoted to virtual, so it was an event that you already do, but you just switched it into a virtual event. Maybe it was something brand new. So just real quick, Carolyn had pointed at the beginning to the different ways, or the different types of event that you all plan. So a lot of people here plan, it looked like fundraisers, conferences, and educational events. So in general terms, is it safe to assume that that's what you're looking to do with your virtual events? And you can feel free to type in the chat. Let us know if you're trying to do virtual events that are either educational or fundraising, or what type of event. You can just use one word in there. Virtual events for education, tours. Oh, that's a cool one. Courses, educational, fundraising, educational. Okay, awesome. So I think you all can see those, but I see some social in there and some entertainment. So those are fun too. There's lots of different ways that you can do virtual events. And a lot of us think of virtual events as these Zoom meetings, because that's kind of what everybody jumped into right away when all this COVID stuff started happening. But there's lots of other ways, there's lots of different things you can do for virtual events. So another thing that we're going to do here in the chat, in 5 words or less, what's been your biggest struggle so far with the virtual events that you've planned? Is anybody willing? Technology setup. Oh, yeah, I feel like you need to be attendance. Okay. Sometimes I feel like you need to be an IT department, like on your own. Figuring out consistent attendance. Okay. Attendance and technology. So those are big ones so far. Fresh ideas, buy-in. Okay. So one of the issues that I have seen a lot with my colleagues and with my clients is, yes, the attendance, making them interesting, keeping them fresh, getting that buy-in. And the technology, I think, it can be an issue all the time, because sometimes technology, I feel like, just does its own thing. But one of the other issues that kept coming up over and over and over is the idea of monetizing virtual events. So like, how do you make money? Because with in-person events, a lot of times, you all are in organizations that you might do kind of the same events every year, or you might do the same types of events where it's obvious what you're going to do. You're going to charge, $10 at the door. You're going to have sponsorship levels at $100, $500, 2,000, 5,000, whatever those are, but they're all kind of laid out, and that financial end is really obvious. With virtual events, that may not be as clear to you. So one of the things that I want to look at is the cost consideration. So when you do virtual events, there's obviously, you're saving some things. So you're not traveling. You might not be paying as much in like staff time, or maybe you're not keeping track of that staff time as much because everybody's working from home, right? You might not be paying for a venue. You're ideally, not paying for catering. So you're not paying for certain things because it's a virtual event, but there are a lot of things that you will be paying for. So I wanted to just kind of look at those a little bit, these ideas, things that you will be paying for that you just have to keep into consideration. Because one of the things with any event, whether it's virtual or in person, is sometimes there's these costs that you forget about. And then you get to the end and you're getting all the invoices in and you find out, oh shoot, and you get some surprises that you didn't really want. So one of the things that I encourage everybody to do, whether you're hiring somebody to do your event or you're using staff or volunteers, is to try to keep track of your time. And I think that can be very difficult, but I think it can be important, because if you're going to weigh the cost of your event, if you're paying people, or even if you're not paying people, you need to know kind of what kind of time and energy is going into that, because if you're going to try to replicate it in the future, that's going to be important to make those decisions. Virtual event software and IT. So Zoom can be a free platform, but there's all kinds of other things that you can do with Zoom that they actually charge for. And then there's bigger Zoom accounts that they charge for too. So those can actually really add up. Software like GoToMeeting, same thing. All of those fees can add up. On the other end of things, if you're doing like a fundraising gala or an auction, there's software, there's companies out there and services where you can hire to put on those types of things. So they do kind of the production and the back end of that. Some of them do the payment processing. One of the things with that, though, is there can be a big investment of dollars, for them to set all of that up. So it's just one thing that you look at. One of the ones that I was looking at yesterday is called One Cause. I asked them for a ballpark price, and they said 500 to 50,000. So that is a more extreme example, but just something to keep an eye on. I say graphic design. So a lot of you might be familiar with tools like Canva or Publisher, other things like that. So yes, sometimes you're not hiring a professional graphic designer, but one thing with virtual events is you want everything to look professional. So depending on the type of event that you're doing, you want everything to be consistent. It may be worth it to look into some professional graphic design. And along that same line, professional video. So if you're producing this big event and you're going to be incorporating video, yes, iPhones can take fantastic video sometimes, but it's also important to consider professionals in some of these areas. Maybe for a hybrid event, which is a whole other ballgame. Maybe that'll have to be a next topic, Carolyn. But there's definitely a value in having these professionals and professional services to make your event look better. marketing costs. So some of you said attendance was an issue. So that could be because of a lack of marketing or a misalignment of marketing or whatever. That's definitely the case sometimes. But it could also be other things, like people are maybe tired of online events, or they have kind of a picture in their head of an online event because they had one experience before. So basically with online events, you have to go above and beyond to try to keep people engaged, to try to impress people, to try to make an impression, because one, they're very common right now, but two, it's very easy for people to get distracted. So when you're thinking about creating this online event, try to think about the costs that are going to be associated with actually getting people there. And I say, getting people in the room, but getting people in the virtual room and getting people to commit. Speaker costs can be another cost. I had a client recently that said something like, well, we can just find some videos online and we can just use those. That may not be something that you want to do. There may be copyright issues and things like that. If you're going to get a professional speaker, they may charge you, even if they are doing this from their living room. And then the last one is swag bags and giveaways. So there's lots of different ways that you can incorporate that, and we'll talk about those a little bit further down the line. But just because it's a virtual event doesn't mean that you shouldn't consider swag. And then the other thing with cost considerations, so there's all that kind of stuff, and then there's trying to figure out what you're going to charge. So a lot of people for virtual events are assuming that they should all be free. And a lot of virtual events were all free, especially at the beginning of the shutdown. A lot of us were just doing everything online because it was going to be temporary. And so you could do this for free, and then we would get back to our, regularly scheduled programming where we charge for events. Some of us thought that would be back in May, but, or, anytime this year. And who knows at this point if in-person events, especially larger, are even going to be able to happen this year. I would assume that they're not going to be able to. So we need to figure out how to structure costs for virtual events so that you can actually charge people for them. So while every event isn't necessarily one that you should charge for, it is okay to charge for an online event. If you're delivering excellent content, if you're going above and beyond, and if it's content that people would normally pay to see in person, then you can justify charging for the event. Sometimes charging is good because it demonstrates that there is a value. So sometimes, people put a lot of events on their calendar. I don't know how many Zoom events you all registered for this week and how many you actually attended. But sometimes with all of those free events, it's easy to kind of let those go by the wayside and kind of skip them or whatever it is. So if you consider charging for an event, people aren't going to skip it. It demonstrates a commitment. The other idea that I really like, which goes along the same vein as live events, is a VIP option. So maybe your event is free, but maybe there's some bonus content at the end of the event, or maybe there's some bonus swag, or maybe there's some additional things that they get if they enter as a VIP. So maybe you're charging those VIPs, but it's really worth it. Maybe for a gala, they get a bottle of champagne, delivered to them with, catered charcuterie board or whatever that is. So there's some different things that you can do for that VIP option to make that value a little bit more. But I would encourage you to consider the goals. So are you looking at, immediately you want money in the bank account at the end of this event? Or are you looking kind of more future where, hey, it's okay to do it for free, or it's okay to do a few for free just to build our list, kind of what we were talking about at the very beginning. So I want to know, and I haven't looked at the chat here for a second, have any of you charged for events yet online? Have you charged for virtual events in the past, let's say 6 months? Yes, not yet, yes, yes. Awesome, not yet. Okay, cool. So some of you have and some of you haven't. Encouraging donations, that's a great point. Okay. But I'm going to assume that all of you have at least had the conversations within your organization about whether to charge or not and what to charge. So that can be a really difficult thing, and it can be a really difficult thing for live events too. So it's something definitely worth looking at the very beginning. Like we said, make sure it aligns with your goals, but make sure that there's a definite value there and that you're going above and beyond with your virtual event, especially if you're going to charge. But even if it's free, there needs to be a value to it. So I called the VIP pricing like a free plus option. And I think that's an interesting way to kind of ease yourself into some paying events, or to kind of think outside the box. Maybe you're going to, encourage new donors. There's lots of different ways that you can do that. So I think I have an example in here of a race that I'm doing. It's a virtual race. So this is a fundraiser. And this is one of my clients. We had planned to do this event in person, but we aren't able to do that because of the state park regulations. So when we first started talking about doing this as a virtual race, the question that kept coming up is, well, why would anybody attend? Like you said a lot at the beginning, attendance was an issue. Some of you said that in the chat. So my husband was kind of joking, and he's like, well, why would anybody do a virtual race? Like, why would you even run it? Like, I don't understand the concept. So I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of these virtual races popping up. But one of the things that we talked about with pricing with this event is, you'll notice the pricing is on this sheet. Those are much lower prices, especially for the 10K and the 20 miler, than we would normally do for this race in person. But our costs are going to be lower. So we're not going to be providing the food and the hospitality. We're not going to be having to pay the state park fees. And there's a lot of other additional things that we're not going to have to be paying for at the beginning. So we looked at our cost to try to figure out the registration price, but we also looked at the perceived value. So people are running this race, but they're going to be running it on their own, or possibly with a small group, in a socially distant way. So we looked at the registration prices, and then we decided to adjust the pricing down. But then we also decided to add in extra swag that we normally wouldn't do. We added a lot more swag for this year's event for virtual, because it's just another way to encourage people to participate. So that's been interesting, seeing how people have been reacting to that. Registration just opened up. So I'm not sure yet, exactly how it's going to go, but so far the feedback has been really positive. So I wanted to talk about sponsorship a little bit, but first we're just going to talk about some kind of general online event. I'll call them things. That's sophisticated. So before, during, and after an online event, before, you can do a lot of different things. So you can, Carolyn says here, keep in their inboxes. So you want to provide all the information. You want to tell them what time it is, and you may want to repeat some of this stuff. You may want to send easy to lose those Zoom invitations, especially if you didn't put them in your calendar right away. So you want to provide the details, but that's also beforehand is a great opportunity to announce some of your sponsors. During, you want to provide multiple content types, be interactive, and build in breaks. So I told Carolyn, one of my big concerns with virtual events, and one of my sensitivities, is the engagement, because I myself have a pretty short attention span and a 4-month-old. So I need something to keep me focused and in and a part of the event. So that is huge. And that's one of the big, I would say, roadblocks with virtual events, is try to figuring out how to make it engaging, and then to stay connected afterwards. So you want to ask for feedback, you want to keep in touch with those people. And we would say that you don't share the recording. We'll share the recording with the people that registered, but people that didn't register won't get access to that recording unless somebody else forwards it to them, of course. Because why, if they didn't register, and if they see the next event coming, but they said, oh, they're just going to post it to their page afterwards, I don't even need to register, then that doesn't really work. So make sure that you kind of give people an incentive to actually attend the event, or at least register for the event. And then there's different things that you can do before, during, and after with your sponsors. So have any of you done virtual events yet and had sponsors for those virtual events? Yes? Okay. No sponsors. Yes, the incentive is that it's not recorded. That's a great point. Yeah, some of you have. Okay, cool. So one of the things that I was thinking about when I was thinking about sponsorship considerations, because at first it was kind of a roadblock in my own head. Well, how are we going to recognize sponsors? We're not going to have signage on site. Well, that's very, surface level. So one of the things that I was thinking about was just events that we have done in person, live events, and how sponsors are recognized and what sponsors value. So I think in here there is a picture of some sponsorships that I have worked with before. So Carolyn, are you able to just I think we want to go forward just two maybe. Yeah. Okay. So I'll use this kind of as an illustration. So these are a few different live events. So you have like the big sign at, a festival or a fair. You have at a professional conference, the speakers, and you have the branding behind them. And then also again, at a festival, like a kind of a community event, you have the mascot from the sponsor there, and everybody's getting pictures. So they get all that social media engagement. So the thing that these sponsorships have that you can also have with a virtual event is visibility, and they have some creativity. So those are two things that are going to be the same, whether your event is online or whether your event is in person. So definitely think about the cost of your event. So go back to the beginning, look at your budget, see all your costs, and see what kind of sponsorship money you need to bring in to make sure that you hit your own goals. So look at that. And then I would say adjust for the value that the sponsor is going to get. So maybe this sponsor is actually going to get all of the registration information from all of the attendees. Okay, well that's worth something if the attendees are going to be in their target market. So there's actually a lot of opportunity for better data when you're doing a virtual event, maybe even more so than a live event, depending on what you're doing. And then I say opportunities before, during, and after. So an example of before is when you send out that link to the virtual event, whether it's on Zoom or it's a webinar, kind of whatever it is, you say, and thanks again to our sponsors. That's something simple, but at least they are kind of recognizing the name at that point. In the invitation, so even before they register, you can say, well, this event is presented by, or you can use whatever type of wording that you want, but it's a good way for those sponsors to kind of align their brand with your brand. Content is another one. So we did this actually with a live event last year, but it would work just as well for a virtual event. Is we gave every sponsor an opportunity to do a live video. And we did that on our Facebook page, but we did it with the sponsor. So we kind of set it up as a mini interview, and we talked about, reasons that people will want to attend this event, but we also asked the sponsor to kind of give their own feedback there. So we would say, for example, like, hi, Kelly, thanks so much for, Oliver Outdoor for sponsoring, and we're so excited, and we're grateful for your support, and we wouldn't be able to do this without you. What can people look forward to at the event? So it was almost like a little, news interview or whatever it was, but it was kind of mini commercials, but it was also by interviewing them, we could control the message a little bit because it was live. But we got really good engagement on social media, and the sponsors were really thrilled because it helped to build the engagement on their pages as well. And then we say during the event. So obviously there's slide transitions, there's opportunities for ads as far as, like you see Carolyn's logo is on the bottom of the slides. Like that's something really simple that you can do for any of your sponsors, and that helps them to at least get a little bit of visibility. Now, some sponsors are going to want something that's a little more creative. So maybe with your event, if it's 60 minutes or longer, again, we encourage a break. So maybe you have like a special challenge or an icebreaker in there. So one of my clients talked about doing a push-up challenge as a part of their event. And we said, okay, we could get so-and-so corporation to sponsor push-up challenge, and they would have the opportunity to do a little bit of a commercial, and then we would kind of brand all of that around the sponsor, but it would be helping to raise money at the same time, because this push-up challenge, you had to kind of pledge money, and it all tied into their fundraiser. So there's different things that you can do, but I would say with all sponsorships, virtual or live, make sure you have conversations with your potential sponsors and ask them flat out what benefits are helpful to them and which ones they don't really care about, because sometimes their answers might surprise you. And then the last thing that you can do afterwards is you can, again, you can share attendee registration information. Although if you're going to be doing that, make sure that your attendees actually opt in and that you let them know that you're going to be doing that, because nobody wants to be added to a bunch of lists without your permission. Plus, that's against all the rules. You can have a sponsor that is specifically for the recording. So maybe you didn't see their name too much during the event itself, but maybe when you send out the recording, it's, hey, thanks so much to so-and-so corporation, because of them, we're able to provide you this recording. And maybe that corporation then has the recording with a little bit mini commercial at the beginning or at the end, maybe halfway through, but something like that says, hey, because of their support, we're able to provide you with this content afterwards. And then lastly is all of that data. So you can ask as many questions as you want as a part of your registration. That's almost a whole new topic, but you can gather up all kinds of information. You can give that to their sponsor, and then they have very clear reasons why they should or shouldn't sponsor your event again, basically. So again, branding is really important, visuals, all that kind of stuff, just to make sure that sponsors really feel appreciated and make sure that they're getting the bang for their buck. So I'm going to ask you one more thing here in the chat. Let's see. In 5 words or less, what's your reaction to the term virtual event sponsor? Does anybody have a reaction to that? Positive. Okay. Does any pays? Yes, that's important. In-kind sponsors can be great, but that's almost like a whole new topic, right? Like we need the dollars, right? Value, yes. And I think the value, Eric mentioned that, again, that goes back to having an actual conversation with your sponsor, your potential sponsor. Ask them what they value, ask them what markets they're trying to reach, ask them, what benefits there could be for them, because you might get some really good information and you might be able to create a sponsorship that's actually more beneficial to them and you. Real life sponsors. Yeah. So they don't have to be like fake virtual sponsors. They're actual people. Continued engagement. Yep. Perfect. All right, Carolyn, I will hand it over to you. I think I talked too fast, but that was a lot of information. I think maybe we can talk about all of these things within the groups, maybe?
Yeah, no, that sounds great. So what we will do is I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to stop our recording now as well. We'll do a brief Q&A, and then we'll maybe take 15, 20 minutes to go into groups and just talk about all of the different challenges that we have. Amanda and I will circulate around those groups so that you get a chance to ask us any additional questions or go a little bit more in depth with us. And when we come back, we'll kind of share out what we've talked about, and then I have a couple of different opportunities as well that we can continue to connect and keep this conversation going. So I will go ahead and